Showing up to speak to a room full of experts in journalism without knowing anything about the subject, which is, describes the situation that we're in. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here because I think this is going to be a great opportunity for me as well to learn about something I so deeply believe, which is the power of information to really alter the course of our world. Steve gave me some prompting about how to navigate this, and I hope that it's really discussion based. I'll try to get through some stuff about what we do really quickly, and then love to discuss. The interesting thing about entrepreneurship is it comes from the French word for to take into one's own hands. So this is something that is a deep value of ours at the Unreasonable Institute, and something I wonder if it could also be applicable to journalism. In this presentation, I just want to talk about the way in which that we talk about, or we think about, how to take a venture, get it off the ground, and scale it by talking about first getting an understanding of the customers, talking about the opportunity in front of you, the present moment, and then talking about scaling up what works. So we'll start with the customer piece. In about 1990, the United Nations announced its famous Millennium Development Goals, which many of you may be familiar with. And first among those was the goal to have poverty around the world by the year 2015. They rallied the support of over 180 countries and billions of dollars to implement this project. In 2002, if you take a look at a place like Sub-Saharan Africa, you can see the impact. And if you can't tell the difference between those bars, that's because it's pretty hard. In 1990, about 44.6% of Sub-Saharan African population lived in poverty. That went down by 0.6% by the midway point between 1990 and 2015, when the UN Millennium Development Goals were being evaluated. In absolute terms, this actually went up by 140 million people. So, this prompted, of course, the world to ask why. Why did this not work? And one of the reasons that's suggested is the practice of something that we have been attempting, since the end of World War II for development, and that is charity. We hand over money to countries in Africa. In fact, we've in total given about $2 trillion in foreign aid to the entire continent of Africa since the end of World War II, and seen almost a 0% increase in the median income of any African nation. And part of the reason for that is that these traditional charity-based approaches, rather than empowering people to take a situation into their own hands, are perpetuating dependency, right? They're unable to scale. Even if they do work, they don't have the legs to replicate, to meet the volume of demand for these goods and services. And it simply leaves a lot to be desired. There's just not sufficient impact to continue to rely on these traditional charity-based approaches. So this is when, I experienced this too when I traveled to India. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations out there to understand what was working. Then I did see this continued failure of traditional charity-based models. But what I did see and was really excited about were organizations that were taking entrepreneurial approaches to alleviating poverty. They were empowering people to be agents in their own lives, to take their situation and transform it themselves, creating much more sustainable solutions, and having revenue mechanisms that enabled them to replicate the model. So instead of giving a man to fish, instead of even teaching a man to fish, they were selling fishing poles at a price that a hungry man could afford, so that therefore they could afford to produce more fishing poles and provide them to more hungry people around the world. And this is the opportunity of entrepreneurship. So our fundamental view at the Unreasonable Institute is that this can be one of the greatest drivers of progress in our time, combating problems like poverty, climate change, and perhaps even the problems today that journalism and media face. So what we do at the Unreasonable Institute is basically take people who have crazy ideas in how to change the world and help them to develop a financially viable model so that they can scale it to reach at least 1 million people and create unreasonable impact. And the way in which we do that is by bringing all these entrepreneurs together, and they live in one roof for 6 weeks, under one roof for 6 weeks. Imagine the real world. Then we bring in about 60 different mentors, ranging from the co-founder of Google.org to a guy who's lifted 24 million farmers out of poverty, to the former head of global brand marketing at Coca-Cola, etc., who work with these entrepreneurs to do everything from assembling their teams, to building great brands, to figuring out how they're going to distribute their products and services, to generating revenue, etc. And in doing so, we give their ideas some traction, some legs, and then we connect them with opportunities for seed capital, ultimately support them with a global network so their ideas take off. So that's just a bit of background on what we do at the Institute. I want to talk about actually now, what's going on in our world, and perhaps one of the reasons that both entrepreneurship and media, have to change. And maybe we should start by looking several hundred years ago to the printing press. And something really remarkable happened at the time that the printing press was developed. And it didn't really take root until several hundred years later, when reading became something that was more accessible to the common individual. But it led to something that Benedict Arthur described as the imagined community. For the first time, people were reading about people who weren't in their physical proximity, who didn't live in the same village, for instance. And they were connecting with and starting to feel for people who weren't in that physical proximity. And this is what, at least in Benedict Arthur's conception, led to the development of the nation state, of a community that's larger than just a physical gathering of people. And what we see today is perhaps, not in economic terms or not in terms of trade or anything like that, but perhaps an unprecedented level of human connectivity in which we have the ability to understand instantly what's happening in Haiti, or what someone who has been struck with an earthquake is going through, or what people in Egypt are currently experiencing, thanks to technology and the way that it's empowered us to control the world around us, to learn about the world around us. And one thing it's prompted, I think, is a different answer to this question than we have typically understood. For many years, we thought, the people who were experts in global poverty might have been World Bank economists, people in Geneva, Switzerland, who advised, economic trade, etc. But I think today, more and more people, at least individuals, are starting to recognize the greatest experts in poverty as the poor themselves. And this is perhaps another reason that approaches at the United Nations, for example, have failed. Because they have made decisions in Geneva about situations affecting Zambian farmers. So one of the things that's really important to us at the Unreasonable Institute is bringing together entrepreneurs who have a deep intimacy with the customers that they're trying to serve. If they want to work with Zambian farmers, have they spoken extensively with Zambian farmers? Have they put a product or service in their hands and asked them to give their feedback on it? Are they a Zambian farmer themselves? So increasingly, I think this is an approach that's leading to successful approaches in development, at least from an entrepreneurial perspective, and perhaps even from an information sharing or journalistic perspective. So then the interesting thing is, if you create an entrepreneurial solution to a problem like poverty, it's built on an understanding of your customers' needs. How can you scale it? And at least our thesis about that is through some kind of revenue generating mechanism that at minimum allows you to cover your costs, and minimum allows you to pay for that fishing pole so that you can produce another one. But also to rely on models that you've seen really be popular and really work well. And perhaps two examples of that I just want to share with you are entrepreneurs who participated in the Unreasonable Institute. And one is a group of women who started a reality TV show in Afghanistan that profile entrepreneurs who are, making pickles in factories, or entrepreneurs who are doing any number of things. But the remarkable thing about this is this had 7 million viewers in Afghanistan, and incredibly now every person who watched this show now has an understanding of what a social entrepreneur is, now has an understanding of the struggles that social entrepreneurs face. And many have been inspired, in fact, to take action, to take things into their own hands, to start their own enterprises to move themselves out of poverty. Whoops. And they look at these people as role models for doing that. And that's what reality TV has been able to offer to a country like Afghanistan, which is remarkable. Another really great model that we've seen is one practiced by a guy named Nameka Kegwono, who is a Nigerian farmer. And what he recognized is a lack of information was crippling to farmers. For example, they didn't know how much to sell their crops for at the market. So routinely, they were being cheated out of 2/3 of their income, being told that cassava root should only be sold for maybe 10 shillings when it in fact cost 30. They weren't able to prepare for weather that was approaching that might affect the way that they treat their crops. They didn't know how to vary root depth. They didn't know how to rotate their crops or prevent their livestock from catching diseases. So he created a radio show that now reaches 250,000 farmers in Nigeria, providing them market information, agricultural information, which on average has helped improve their income by 50%, simply through information alone. And the remarkable thing about this is Nameka is using probably what is the most penetrative medium of communication in Nigeria, the radio. He's not attempting to do it through television or through something else that doesn't work, but because he's a farmer himself, he understands that every farmer in Nigeria typically has access to a small 15 kilowatt or radio transmitter of some kind. And so the cool thing about this is through production agreements and through advertising agreements, Nameka has achieved profitability with this venture and expects to continue to achieve profitability in coming years as well. And I think one of the very interesting things for the journalistic field as we continue is how do we ensure that those who are supporting the disbursement of information are people who are aligned with the values that we're trying to share. And perhaps one of the best new models I've heard for this is from Chris Anderson, who's the director of TED. It's something called Ads Worth Spreading. I just wanted to show a really quick clip, if that would be okay. Steve, do we have sound? Any chance?
Yeah, we can plug in.
Great, thank you very much.
I actually believe that to be true. I think you're in a heroic business and a really important one for all of our futures. But if advertising is so great, why the hell is it broken right now online? This is how I think of the online advertising experience right now. See if you can spot anything amiss. It's this relentless series of come-ons, right? Which achieve almost nothing except cluttering up the page. I mean, just once in 1,000 instances, you might get lucky. Bingo. Yes, but overall, is that really worth it? It's such an ugly picture. Now, marketers tend to respond to this by ever more imaginative ways of hijacking people's attention. You know, these clever animated ads that kind of sneak out of the page and leap at you and grab you when you're least expecting. Or my personal bête noire, pre-roll advertising. Here's how that works. Let me show you. So someone wants to watch a video, right? Something they're really excited about. They click, kazam, someone comes in, and the advertiser says, no, you have to watch my ad first. It's brilliant. You know, you've won their attention. Hurrah. There's just one teensy problem. I mean, I'm not a professional psychiatrist, but you have to question the wisdom of choosing your introductory offer to your new customers as being blind rage.